Imagine this, the sound of tense, crackling radio communication. A Chinese voice speaks in Mandarin, followed by a Filipino voice in English. Unidentified vessel, you are in Chinese jurisdictional waters. Change course immediately. To the Chinese vessel, we are conducting a lawful patrol within the Philippine exclusive economic zone. We will maintain our course. So, this isn't a scene from a movie. It's the sound of the front line in a global conflict. For the last year, all the headlines have screamed about tariffs and trade deficits. But while we've been distracted by the economic slugfest between the US and China, the real battle is heating up on the high seas. We've been told the biggest threat is a trade war. We've been told wrong. That trade war is just the public face of a much deadlier conflict brewing in the South China Sea. And as the trade numbers drop, the strategic military moves are escalating, pushing the world toward a crisis that makes economic warfare look like a practice round. So, what is the trade war smokescreen? Well, for years we've gripped by the economic tug of war between Washington and Beijing. The story we're told is a simple one, a battle for economic dominance fought with tariffs and sanctions. And the number from this past year seemed to back that up. The economic chill in 2025 is undeniable. After years of growth, the data is stark. In early months of 2025, U.S. imports from China fell 7% to 128 billion, and U.S. exports to China dropped a staggering 12% to just 40 billion. This isn't just a minor dip, it's a sign of a fundamental rewiring of the global economy. The 2025 trade negotiations have been a roller coaster of punishing tariffs. Chinese goods have faced duties of up to 30%, while U.S. exports have been hit with a wall of retaliatory tariffs. Key American sectors like steel, aluminum, and auto parts remain caught in a tariff vise of 20 to 25%. And you, the consumer, are footing the bill. These tariffs have directly fueled inflation, with some estimates suggesting the trade war is costing the average American household thousands of dollars a year in lost purchasing power. It has shaved nearly a full percentage point off the GDP growth and is projected to shrink the US economy by about 160 billion per year in the long run. Industries are scrambling, moving operations to places like Mexico and Canada to escape the terrorist crossfire. But what if this economic pain is just a symptom? What is the real story isn't about the supply chains, but about the battle lines. While we've been watching the economic scoreboard, the pieces on a much more dangerous board have been moving. And that board is the South China Sea. So, the real battlefield. Forget tariffs for a second and let's talk about what really is at stake. The South China Sea isn't just a body of water, it's one of the planet's most critical commercial arteries. An estimated one third of global shipping, amounting to roughly 3.4 trillion in commercial goods, passes through these waters annually. The waterway is also a treasure chest of resources. The U.S. Energy Information Administration estimates the sea holds about 11 billion barrels of oil and 190 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, improved and profitable reserves, with potentially much more yet to be discovered. It's also home to one of the world's largest fishing zones, a resource vital to the food security of millions. Whoever controls this sea controls the flow of energy, goods, and food to a huge portion of the globe. And China is making it crystal clear it intends to be that controller. Beijing lays claim to nearly the entire sea based on its so-called nine-dash line, a claim that an international tribunal invalidated in 2016, a ruling Beijing simply ignores. To enforce its claim, China has spent years building and militarizing artificial islands in Spratly and Paracel Islands, equipping them with ports, airstrips, and even cruise missiles. The situation is escalating from a slow burn dispute to a series of volatile flashpoints throughout 2025. Chinese and Philippine vessels have been have had repeated aggressive runnings near disputed shoals involving water cannons and dangerous blocking maneuvers. Just a few days ago, at the end of October 2025, the Philippines, alongside the US, Australia, and New Zealand, conducted a joint maritime patrol. Beijing's response was swift and furious. A spokesperson for the People's Liberation of Army accused Manila of being a troublemaker that had severely undermined regional peace and stability, confirming that Chinese forces were deployed to closely track and monitor the exercise. China has flatly declared that all such activities are under our firm control. This is the language of a nation gearing up for a confrontation. In April 2025, new PLA regulations came into force, enshrining preparing for war as their central mission. This isn't just rhetoric, it's a directive to align all military activity with the needs of real combat. Beijing now views the South China Sea not as a simple maritime dispute, but as a front line where sovereignty, its rivalry with the US, and the future of Taiwan all collide. So, what is this global chess match? Well, the United States is not just a passive observer in these high stakes game. Its entire post war strategy in the Pacific is being put to the test. Washington's main response has been to conduct freedom of navigation operations, also known as FONOPS. For decades, the U.S. Navy has deliberately sailed warships and flown aircraft through areas claimed by China to assert these are international waters. The goal is to uphold international law, specifically the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, also known as UNCLOS. But it's a strategy full of risks and a dose of irony. The U.S. is insisting on enforcing a treaty, UNCLOS, that it has famously never ratified itself. Beijing constantly points this out, calling U.S. FONOPS a distortion of international law that only serves the American geopolitical goals. Worse, there's growing evidence that FONOPS aren't working. An Australian research paper from early 2025 concluded the operations have been ineffective and may even be making things worse. As FONOPS become more frequent, China's response grew more hostile. Instead of being deterred, Beijing is using American naval presence as an excuse to further militarize its man-made islands. This has led to a dangerous game of chicken on the high seas, where a single miscalculation by a ship captain could spiral into a shooting war. In response to China's aggression, the U.S. is doubling down on its alliances. In late October 2025, the U.S. and Philippines announced a new joint task force specifically designed to deter Chinese coercion in the South China Sea. This adds a web of security partnerships with Japan, Australia, and India, all aimed at counterbalancing China's power. The Philippines, which is on track to chair the most powerful ASEAN bloc in 2026, has been actively deepening those ties, hosting U.S. military assets and granting access to more bases. This is the board. On one side, China is using its military and economic might to enforce a claim that would give it unmatched regional power. On the other, the US and its allies are drawing red lines and conducting military drills. A conflict here would be catastrophic. According to a report from the for Economics and Peace, a blockade of Taiwan alone is estimated to cost the global economy 2.7 trillion in the first year alone. For regional economies like Taiwan, Singapore, and the Philippines, a wider conflict could erase between 10% and 33% of their GDP. So, the trade war has been a costly distraction, but its real danger is that it has pulled our focus away from the far greater risk of military confrontation. The South China Sea is where economic interests, national pride, and military power are all colliding. The time bomb is ticking. The question is no longer if it will go off, but when, and what the world will look like after it does. What's your take on the biggest risk in the South China Sea? Is a military conflict inevitable, or can diplomacy still win? Let us know in the comments below. From plummeting trade figures to naval standoffs, the connection is clear. The economic decoupling of the world's two largest economies is happening in the shadows of a much more dangerous military buildup. Every tariff, every sanction pushes the two giants further apart, eroding the shared interest that might prevent a crisis from boiling over. In the intense waters of the South China Sea, where history, resources, and ambition seem to meet, the margin for error is shrinking to zero. This is the real story of 2025. Not a trade war, but the slow, steady march toward a conflict that could redefine the 21st century.